Hey guys, it's Todd from Like-Minded Lunatics bringing you, yes, another drink, play, swear. It's all we do around here. In fact, even though the guy in Chinatown told us not to do these three things after midnight, drink, play, swear is all we want to do around here. While I'm thinking about it, please hit that subscribe button. Look at that, right there, bang, in the bottom right-hand corner. Thanks for being with Like-Minded Lunatics, and thanks for coming back to Drink, Play, Swear. Like-Minded Lunatics is not just Drink, Play, Swear. I'm always telling you this. If you're not familiar with the other content on the channel, please check it out. We just did a really fun Like-Minded Lunatics try. We've been trying, TV dinners the last few months. Well, with Halloween around the corner, welcome to October, by the way. With Halloween around the corner, we decided to try some candy. It's me, my buddy and writing partner, Mark Gifford. We got Ricky, and we got Lottie, who you've been seeing on the Friday night videos and the Monday matchups. Why don't you go check out that video right there? We're eating candy. Who do you think likes the Almond Joy the best of the group? Who doesn't care for it too much? Those are the kind of thrilling questions you'll be asking yourself as you watch us eat candy for half an hour. I promise it's a better time than it sounds. All right, I'll quit trying to sell that business. Welcome to Drink, Play, Swear. You know what it is that we do around here. Play a game, usually a classic one. I pair it with a beverage, and I tell you a story. Just talking, just kicking back. Well, here we are. In October, all I've been doing is selecting Halloween-themed games, scary movie-themed games. Last week, we played Friday the 13th. If you haven't seen that one yet, go check that out. And the week before, we did Ghostbusters on the Nintendo. Ghostbusters! I don't even know if I should call this a good game or a bad game, because honestly, I don't know this game well enough. I've played it maybe a total of 30 minutes in my life. This is Gremlins 2, the new batch. There was no Gremlins 1 game on the Nintendo Entertainment System. There was an Atari game, I've never played it before, and a couple of other, PC games, I'm sure. But Nintendo got Gremlins 2, and I'm pairing it today with the Jim Beam and Coke. Get yourself something. Ice cold refreshment. All right. I want to talk Gremlins 2, and I want to talk scary movies today. That's what I want to do. So let's get into this game and check out if it's any good. Okay, 1990 was near the end of NES run. I think the Super Nintendo came out in 91 or 92. So you can tell they had really started maximizing what the 8-bit system can do. This is a lot better graphics than some of the early games, don't you think? All right. Listen to this theme. This theme is like, it's almost the right song. But not quite. All right. On first playing this game, I love the movie. Some people don't love it. I love the movie. But I have always thought of this movie, Gremlins 2, in a similar light as Return of the Killer Tomatoes. I don't know if you know the movie, but I always think of those two movies together, Return of the Killer Tomatoes and Gremlins 2. And then I start playing this game for the first time last week, and there's huge tomatoes. I know that the tomato briefly makes itself in Gremlins 2. There's a disgusting tomato gremlin, right? He's like burping tomatoes or something. But that's not the only connection I see between the two movies, Return of the Killer Tomatoes and Gremlins 2. We're going to talk about that in a minute in today's lecture. But let's kick back. You see that? I'm not any good at this game. And, I tend to want to just say, oh, well, it's a bad game if I'm not any good at it. But most NES games, even the good ones, take practice, right? Okay, so we're going to give this game a chance today. We're going to give it a shot. These orbs are money somehow. And you can buy stuff from your old, is it master? You were a pet, right? It's okay to say that. Look, here he is. Welcome, Gizmo. What item would you like? Yes. Okay. I'm gonna get some health because yeah. Thanks. You can only buy one thing, even if you have more money. All right. Oh, it's tomato business. Gremlins 2. Saw it in the theater. Gremlins 1, amazing. That's got to be on my top 10 movies of all time list. Horror thriller, any subgenre. Great movie. I didn't see it in the theater. I was born in 81. I think I watched it on TV a million times. Taped it from HBO or something. You know, when you taped movies from HBO, you were always missing like the first 8 minutes, you know, because you got it together to check the TV guide. Oh, that movie's on. You run out there and watch it. So I think, you know, I've seen the first 8 minutes of that movie like exactly 3 times, but Gremlins 1 I've seen 748 times. No less than. Gremlins 2 comes out, and it's like a sequel killer, this movie, you know? It just decided to go in a completely different direction. Looking into it for today, that rat jumped over the chasm? Why are there chasms in this? What is it, clamp? The clamp building is very unsafe. I think that's the setting of this game. But look at this, bats and stuff. I'm dying. I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna continue. Let's talk for a minute. I saw it in the theater, and what's the striking thing when you see Gremlins 2? Well, let's see. I was like, I think it came out in 1990 or 89, so I'm like 8 or 9 years old. Going to the theater, movie starts, you're eating your popcorn and everything. Movie starts, what were we surprised to see? Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, right? Wow. Come to find out, looking into this a little bit, that Joe Dante, the director for Gremlins 1 and 2, went to Chuck Jones, celebrated Chuck Jones, you know, the dude who was responsible for so many great Bugs Bunny and Warner Brothers cartoons, went to him and asked if he would do a short at the beginning, a brand new Bugs Bunny short. He'd been out of the game for decades, you know. I mean, they quit making those Warner Brothers cartoon shorts that were at the beginning of movies in the 50s, you know. Those cartoons were, you know, rose to popularity in the 30s and through the 40s and stuff during, you know, World War II and everything. But then in the 50s, it sort of fizzled out, right? Some of the best ones made in the 50s, but then, you know, it fizzled out. But so here we go, fast forward to 1990, and we're getting our first, like, authentic Bugs Bunny short in a long time. And Joe Dante was very intentional about it. He wrote that he wanted to set the tone, and that, you know, kids seeing the original Gremlins were terrified, right? Frightened, because it was sort of like, you know, a horror movie for kids. I mean, it had all the tension, the great effects, you know, those jump scare moments, cool monsters and everything. The Gremlins are probably the coolest monster, don't you think? Like right up there with the Frankenstein's monster. They're just like the coolest monsters you ever seen. Where am I going here? Okay. And so amazingly, Gremlins, along with another Spielberg creation, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, were the reason that the MPAA agreed to create the PG-13 rating. Because all these parent groups were upset that Temple of Doom, oh man, when they're eating the monkey's brain and stuff, and then Gremlins, too frightening for kids. But it was PG because that was all that, you know, there was no murder, there was no bad language, so it was not an R-rated movie, but it was frightening. So Spielberg dreams up the PG-13 concept, I'm dead again, pitches it to the studios, and it becomes the, like, most sought-after rating. If you're putting out a movie, you know, in the theaters, the PG-13 is going to give you your largest audience. You're probably going to make the most money. If you hit an R and you want a large audience, you're going to get rid of a few curse words and maybe some of the gorier scenes. And if you're only at a PG, you actually might spice it up a little bit to, you know, appeal to the parents or to appeal to teens more than just little ones, you know. So Gremlins created that whole thing, and parents are expecting Gremlins 2 to be another one of those. But what's Joe Dante do? He creates this madcap, bizarre sequel. I call it a sequel killer because, like, how do you go? How would you make a Gremlins 3 that's serious after that with high stakes? You know what I mean? They've been trying to make a Gremlins 3 for forever. I don't know if they're going to do it. I hear there's supposed to be a Netflix show. All right, but look at this. Look at this tomato. It's like an emphasis on the tomato, and it gets me thinking about the fact that Return of the Killer Tomatoes and Gremlins are so tied in my head. I got to thinking about it, and it wasn't just a hunch. There is something there. Now, Googling it and doing a little research, I can't find anyone intentionally saying that those two movies are tied together. But I am going to, if you are willing, assemble evidence for why these movies are so similar and maybe what they're trying to get at. So, first of all, Return of the Killer Tomatoes is a great movie. You have to see it if you've never seen it. There's a wonderful Blu-ray transfer of it for those of you who have nice, TV screens and stuff. If you want it to look good on 4K, looks great on 4K. George Clooney's in it. Young George Clooney. You could argue a womanizing George Clooney's in that movie, and it's great because Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, the original, was trying to be serious. It was trying to be a scary movie. The heart, I guess. The heart. I'm low. Yes. I got a lot of cash to spend. Pops. What's his name? I'm gonna call him Pops. But it's a bad movie, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I mean, you can love it, similar to like, the Trauma movies, Toxic Avenger and stuff. Like, you can love it, and there's nothing wrong with loving it. But you got to recognize it's bad, right? After all, it's tomatoes rolling down the street. They don't have faces. They don't have fangs. They don't have scary powers. Some of them are real big, like the big ones we saw a few minutes ago. But that's it. So what do you do with that? You make a madcap film. You make a funny one. And I always think it's interesting that Gremlins went that direction because I understand why Return of the Killer Tomatoes would do it, because the first one's a bad movie, you see. And so you go, okay, we made a bad movie. Sort of like the Evil Dead, right? Evil Dead, great movie, but I mean, it's kind of bad, right? So you make a sequel that's like self-aware, the self-aware sequel. In fact, in both movies, Return of the Killer Tomatoes and Gremlins 2, there is a moment where the narrative breaks down, right? And Gremlins 2, in Gremlins 2, the narrative breaks down, and halfway through the movie, it stops. That happens in Return of the Killer Tomatoes as well. They run out of money to make the movie, and so the movie ends. The crew walks off, and when it comes back on, they have sold sponsorships, and they're all wearing Nike and talking about the snacks they're eating and stuff. It's hilarious movie. By the way, Michael Myers later would steal that gag for Wayne's World, but it's from Return of the Killer Tomatoes first. So yeah, the two movies were made only 2 years apart. They both have moments in them where the narrative breaks down and we wink at the audience. They're both intentional. What did I pick up there? They're both intentional decisions to make us aware that it's a movie. It's aware of itself. Oh, look. Okay, do you remember this moment in the film? They didn't show it, but the reason he gets wet is because of the water fountain, right? The water fountain has sprung a leak, and there's a janitor who comes up, and he fixes the leak, but it spurts and gets Gizmo on the back, right? You know who that actor is? That actor is John Astin, and John Astin is the major villain in Return of the Killer Tomatoes. Cameo in this movie, janitor who is responsible for propelling, the danger of this thing. I don't think it's a coincidence. I can't think it's a coincidence. Well, who cares? Even if all this was intentional, who cares, Todd? I do. That's the short answer. Made 2 years apart. Both have John Astin in them. Both spoofs of semi-serious first movies. What is happening with these landmines? I don't think this is canon. I don't remember this in the film. Narrative breakdown, but I think there's also something interesting going on, and this happened a lot in 80s and 90s movies. The tone of them also makes fun of corporate greed, Like in Gremlins 2, you got the Clamp Tower. What's it called, the Clamp Tower? Mark, help me out.
You're absolutely correct. It was named after the character Daniel Clamp, played by the amazing character actor John Glover.
You knew he was going to have the answer. You just knew it. But he's like a wealthy guy who's sort of like Well, I mean, he's sort of like let's not say his name if we don't have to, but a certain businessman who made himself very famous and became president. That movie is making fun of Trump, right? But the corporate greed is sort of leading to all this terrible destruction in a way, don't you think? At least maybe that's part of what it's saying. And then in Return of the Killer Tomatoes, when they sign the sponsorship deals and they're constantly talking about their candy bars, and it actually gets in the way of their dialogue, it's like talking about the horrors of corporate greed. But despite all of the similarities between the two movies, I think there is one huge difference that you have to sort of inspect. Look, I got I beefed up my power here. What is it? Is the matchstick is making me shoot fire or something? I don't know. Ooh, that's a tough little spot. Here's the major difference. I think Return of the Killer Tomatoes is madcap fun all the way through. There's no stakes. There's no larger message or point being made. But here's what I think that's interesting about Gremlins, both movies, is that there does seem to be a statement about this sort of fear of technology. I'm up to my eyeballs in money. Whatever this... Oh, crystal balls, maybe? Maybe they're crystal balls. I want to power up. Let's see what it does. Yeah, look at this. Gizmo never looked so good. Well, he looked cool as Rambo. Fear of technology. All right. Stick with me here. What's with the palm trees? I don't know. All right, stick with me here. In the first movie... the dad is an inventor, right? Ray Peltzer, fantastic. Mark?
Randall.
This is when you chime in, buddy. I didn't do any research. You're the research team. You're the whole team, Mark. Let me try and let's see if I can get it. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Something's for a fantastic world. We make the impossible possible.
Fantastic ideas for a fantastic world. I make the illogical logical.
Right? Okay. Anyway, Ray Peltzer.
Rand Peltzer.
Is this horrible inventor, the bathroom buddy, and it sprays the shaving cream all over him, and he's a joke, right? He's a joke. Because, see, there's something there. There's something there. They're making a comment, like technology will only get you so far. Because then take that and make it a larger scale in Gremlins 2, where it's a successful billionaire who also has crackpot inventions and stuff, right? Like kind of... ideas that are supposed to make modern day living easier, but end up making everything harder, you know? And I think there was a very real sense from the Gen X folks, and I am what you call a cusper. I sort of feel partially Gen X and partially millennial. But there was this sort of fear of technology, I feel like, from much of the older Gen X generation. That, this stuff was, it was for kids, it was maybe for nerds, but, it wasn't going to take over their lives. And, of course, you look at what our lives became now. When I was a kid in the 90s and stuff, there was a certain kind of nerd in school you called a computer nerd, right? And a computer nerd was somebody who was obsessed with computers. But if you think about it, they were doing all the stuff that everyone does now, right? Well, they were on AOL Messenger. Okay, they were texting people. They were sharing video files with their friends. Okay, YouTube, they were figuring out how to use the computer to make their lives easier. I mean, I think the thought that wasn't going to be the future died in 2007 when the iPhone came around. You know what I mean? Before that, you could kind of argue that, computers aren't the answer, man. But since then, it's like... we've accepted it, and most people even prefer it. They like it. They like being able to use their phone to buy their groceries and do their banking and talk to friends and all that stuff. But I think Gremlins 1 and 2 have this real old school mentality, and it's before the iPhone, because it's this thought that technology is the enemy. That there's something horrifying about technology, that it causes more problems than it does solutions. It reminds me of the Romantics, going through college and grad school, interested in literature and in different literary movements. Romanticism is, yes, about passion and feelings, but it's also about great fear and horror, masterpiece of that time, right? Frankenstein, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Let's just take the Shelley off, though, because Percy Shelley is a horrible poet. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. But Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley created this genius story, right? And so much of it was tied in fears during Romanticism of what technology was going to do to us, what it was going to bring the world. Because at that time, see, we were beginning to develop new medicines. We were beginning to develop new surgical practices. People were looking at cadavers for the first time, see, for scientific reasons. And people were saying it's unholy, it's unnatural, it's disgusting to be looking around at somebody's body. You have to be some kind of sicko to enjoy doing this stuff, right? And so there was a fear of what happens if we mess around with this stuff too much. Well, the positive end of it, of course, was medicine and surgical practices and life expectancy getting larger, right? But there was this natural fear, I think, that shows itself in Frankenstein, that you can accidentally make a monster, and not necessarily even a monster at first, but an unnatural creature who actually like wants a parent, wants someone to care for them. But when, the doctor sees this, what he sees as a disgusting thing, he shuns it, and then it sort of becomes a monster later, right? I don't know if there is something to that with the Gremlins, but I definitely sense that there is this fear of technology and the kind of statement like nature's gonna win. Like you can come up with all the gadgets you want, but in the end, the monsters are going to come get you, right? And it reminds me that Gremlins, that term, as far as I know, oh look, we're finally seeing one of the bad guys. As far as I know, started during World War I, when pilots would talk about sometimes in their airplanes, there would be something that went wrong in the plane that shouldn't have, that the wiring all of a sudden was messed with, that there were parts missing or broken that shouldn't have been missing or broken, that sometimes when they were piloting, they could hear strange noises on the outside or somewhere in the cabin. They came up with this term gremlins, And it reminds me that like some of the fears they had was maybe that like we're not supposed to be flying. We're people. Right? And you get what you deserve. So those gremlins, those little monsters, were in there eating away at the planes to ground us because we belong on the ground. Sort of like, Frankenstein, like, hey, don't be messing around with that cadaver. You're going to do something you can't stop. And I feel like that old school mentality, the fear of technology and the fear of messing around with the natural world too much, it shows up in Gremlins in some kind of weird late 20th century way. All right. I mean, too much for you today? Well, I just finished my beverage. I hope you guys are doing well. It's Gremlins 2. I made it to the second level. I'm shooting fireballs. I feel pretty accomplished. I don't even know if there are any bosses in this, but it's a pretty fun platformer. I'm not going to say great, but I'm also not going to say it's awful. All right, thanks for being with us today. I am so excited for the impending doom of All Hallows Eve. I hope you are as well. In between now and the next time I talk to you, I'm Todd. Thanks for being here. Glug, 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 glug. See ya.